Hi, I'm Ashley Cooley, a birth, baby, and sleep specialist and mom of 3. There's so much information out there, right? This show is dedicated to helping you clear out the noise so you can figure out what will work best for your baby and your family. Having worked with countless families over the years, including my own, the information and strategies I'll share are based on these experiences, my extensive training, and we're even going to back it all up with some science. My goal is to help you make informed decisions, and we're here to break down what it takes to raise well-adjusted, securely attached, and happy babies. If you're looking to learn more about your baby, gain more confidence in your parenting, and get as much sleep as you can through it all, you've come to the right place. Bringing up baby is about to get a little easier. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bringing Up Baby podcast. We've got another episode for you today focusing on your postpartum self. Because once again, if we want to really show our little ones how to be in this world, it's to always remember to look after ourselves and to show them what it means to actually do that. We have to be at or near the top of our list, but as new parents or parents of young ones, I know that you know that we often forget about this. We have to put our own mask on first before we can even begin to help grow or connect with another person, right? So for today's show, I'm going to share a conversation I had with Amy MacAulay. Amy is the owner of Embrace Doula Services in Halifax, Nova Scotia. She and her team are actually among a myriad of postpartum doulas in our communities, and they are a truly invaluable resource. In this show, Amy's going to share how to really prepare for what's to come after baby arrives and where you might need some extra help. We get into things like when the right time is for visitors to come by versus helpers, and what specific tasks are actually helpful for others to do for you. Because trust us, the helpers really want to help. Definitely listen all the way to the end here too, because you don't want to miss our really honest discussion about how to handle unsolicited or unhelpful advice from loved ones. They really do mean well, and you know what? You might actually be surprised at what they're willing to learn. All right, here we go. Here's my chat with Amy of Embrace Doula. So Amy, thanks so much for joining us. I'm so excited to get to talk to you about this early postpartum period. And if I may say so, I kind of feel like we are 2/3 of a postpartum dream team, if you will.
Exactly.
I think all we're missing is maybe a pelvic floor. No, not just maybe a pelvic floor physiotherapist that has that skill. But when it comes to childbirth education, we both are in there. When it comes to the postpartum period, you offering support, mental health stuff, sleep, the whole gamut. This is where parents are. I mean, we can educate, and we do as much as we can ahead of time, but living that is another story.
It's hard to imagine what it's like until you're there.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. No, because we'll all hear stories and, we're trying to make up what that might look like for us, but that could be different. Look at us. We're already diving into conversation, and I want to say hi to you. Thank you. Amy, why don't you first start out with telling us a little bit about yourself, what you do as a postpartum doula and as a mom, and tell us about yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be on this podcast today. And like you said, our services complement each other so well. So that's lovely. I've had Embrace Doula for over 10 years now, which is so crazy to think about. I'm here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I have 2 kids that have birthdays this week, so they're turning 8 and 11, which is so old. I know. But I work as a postpartum doula here in Halifax. And I actually have 3 other postpartum doulas that have joined my team recently because the demand has grown so much, which I think is really wonderful and really important. So at Embrace Doula, we do postpartum doula services. I facilitate infant massage classes. There is a drop-in that I facilitate once a week at Luminate. We also do, one of my new lactation consultants is a Leche League leader. And then I also have an online course called Bringing Home Baby. So we do a lot of different things here at Embrace Doula. And it's such a privilege to be able to support families where they're at, right? In the raw moments of the first couple of days at home, and seeing with them when they're kind of vulnerable and in the midst of the unknown. So we've been doing that for a lot of years.
Amazing. And I'm sure I know I would if I
Mm,
was going to be a new mom again and had that
yes.
experience with the postpartum doula. I wish I had, because
Hmm.
I feel like you just get that reassurance that you, as a postpartum doula, are seeing this all the
Hmm.
time and hearing these same stories. So to have that knowledge of like, it is going to be okay and we all go
Yes.
through this, but I can hear you and I can listen and I can be here to support you.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think that's the beauty of it is that like we know what to say and we know what not to say. We
mm,
listen
mm,
and we provide that reassurance and even like building the mother and parents' self-esteem, right?
yeah.
It
Yeah.
We see that confidence build over time and it's amazing to see that process.
Can you dive in a little bit more and like in more detail? What does a
Mhm.
postpartum doula do?
So postpartum doulas, they're someone that is not knowledgeable around newborns. We are familiar with that newborn time. So we know a lot about babies. We know a lot about feeding routines, baby care, the cues, the nurturing. We also know how to, with conversation, to educate families about babies and to teach them different things. So there's that teaching part which happens through conversation as well as role modeling. And then the other part about postpartum doulas is that we're able to provide the hands-on support. So there's always a bit of that conversation and a bit of that role modeling and that learning for question answering time. And then we do things like light housekeeping. We do a lot of meal prep. We multitask, so we'll wear a baby so that we can get things done. So the visits look a little bit different, but it's someone that's knowledgeable around that time and is skilled and trained and has the education about how to go in there with an unbiased approach and giving non-judgmental, up-to-date information and knowing what's helpful at that time.
Mm, which, gosh, if everyone could just
Mm,
have that,
I know. I want one
Um,
myself.
right. But to not only is that so supportive, so you baby wearing, I see that you post
Mhm.
about this a lot, and I love to see it because that's what we all we need
Yeah.
as parents, as of with young
Yes.
infants. You're baby wearing, you're meal prepping, and not only is that helpful to a mom or new parents in the moment, but
Hmm.
they're also able to see, like, I think that makes a difference for them to see like, oh, this is how I might do this when I'm really, you know what I mean? So,
Yes.
oh, how does the baby wearing work while you're meal prepping and that kind of stuff? So you're kind of modeling that, like you said.
Yeah, and it's even getting the like sometimes that we do things and they get ideas from us,
Mm,
or they don't realize how helpful baby wearing can be. So sometimes we don't hold the baby at all, right? Like sometimes if the baby is skin to skin with the mom and they're nursing, sometimes we do things that we try to do things that are helpful so they don't have anything to make their life easier.
mm,
So it's like stocking diaper stations and making sure they have a setup with water and a snack right beside them, their phone, the remote, a charger, and just making sure that we do all of the things that may take the task part out of their postpartum time.
do you primarily work with new parents, infant stages, or
Mhm.
what's the age range there?
Usually the postpartum, sometimes people inquire prenatally if they know that they could benefit from the support. And then sometimes we get inquiries postpartum if challenges arise or if they feel like they want the additional support. So it really varies.
Mhm.
And the main time that we work with families is usually from birth until 3 or 4 months.
Mm.
So it's during that, like what we would call a fourth trimester.
Absolutely. That adjustment period for sure. I mean, not
Yes,
to say there's not adjustments
I
after that,
know.
but that there are some big adjustments in those first few months for sure.
There are. And I mean, I think that's one of the things that families like is, I mean, we are in families' houses. It's like a minimum 3 hours, but sometimes we're in families' houses for multiple visits throughout the week. And
Mm,
they can adjust that however they need to, but they can also text or phone us or email us anytime. Like we
amazing.
are there, like instead of Googling, right? Because Google gives you all of the answers, the good, the bad, the outdated, and the up to date. And then it's trying to navigate through all of that information. So if
Hmm.
they have one person that they can rely on for information or even community resources, right? if they're looking for a pelvic floor or a sleep consultant or pediatric nutritionist or something. Part of our job is to connect them with those resources so we stay within our scope, because we can't give medical information as a postpartum doula, but we can refer them or even provide them with names of people.
For sure. I mean, I get the same thing as a sleep consultant in childbirth education and all that when you're working with someone specifically around this time, and that's so new, and even if it's not your first child, it's still a new addition and a shift.
Yes.
So having somebody that you can kind of rely on, I guess, to help you sift through that information, because inevitably they are going to probably feel like they trust you, know some stuff about babies. So, oh, do you happen to know about this as well, or that? So being able to refer to resources is, outstanding. Yes. Very much needed.
I have a lot of those people on speed dial too, right? Like,
oh yeah,
as you know, like with the community resources, like I know a lot of people and have their number and can simply just like ask them a question or connect as needed.
If we could just all have it at our fingertips. What are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing that new parents are having with their newborns? Like, what are the commonalities that you find you're regularly working on or talking about, would you say?
I find that one of the biggest challenges is that people plan a lot for labor and delivery, but they don't plan a lot for the postpartum. So they learn a lot about birth, but they may not know a lot about babies.
Yeah.
So sometimes I feel like I'm the bearer of bad news when they say they wake up a lot or they cry or they do this. And all of that can be normal newborn behavior, but it's not like you see in the movies or in those beautiful photos. Like there are or maybe challenges that arise. So I think that, like we said earlier, people think they know what to expect with the sleepless nights or challenges that may arise, but until you're in it, it can seem so challenging at that time. So I find in learning about newborns and preparing for that, that's a bit of an adjustment in regards to parents. And then the other biggest challenge right now is isolation, right? Like with COVID, there's like no mom group. Well, there's kind of starting up again, but there's like no mom groups, no swimming groups. People are isolated. And then there's other services that haven't been continued. So I find that between all of those, parents this time feel like they've been a bit gypped, right? In regards to their postpartum. And it kind of, if you have those challenges during those times and you don't have the support, it just is so isolating and so lonely.
Right. Absolutely. So, not only whether you have family or friends or people nearby, the isolation and limiting numbers and all that stuff is still very much a real thing. But even if you don't have family nearby, I talk to so many people, especially lately, that are moving back to Nova Scotia or just moving here, period, don't know anybody, wanting that connection and stuff. So even just starting out with support, you need that support in that postpartum period, and then that can lead to more connection.
And even new parents want to get out to socialize and to meet other parents and to build that community. But then it's like, how do I do that safely? Yeah. And is that worth the risk of potentially getting, like, there's just so much going through that thought process. And there's no right or wrong answer. Yeah. It's what people are comfortable with. But it is tricky to constantly be dealing with that and the changes and family members and all sorts of things. It just makes it so much more challenging during these times of isolation.
Absolutely. Something's coming to mind. I want to say early 2020 when COVID was really first starting and we didn't know much. And anyway, I seem to remember, and I'm not sure if you heard this as well, that there was some reports, I guess, of parents having babies during COVID that, of course, like the obvious downsides that we've been kind of continuously living these last couple of years, but that the positive side of that, or something positive, I should say, that came out of that was that new parents or new families were able to were not able to, but they were forced to stay
Yes.
home and reconnect and build on that bonding, that
Mm-hmm.
feeding. I think breastfeeding rates were going up. Did you hear that as well? Is that
I did.
ringing a bell? Yeah. I'm curious if you're seeing those kinds of things as families come together, hunkering down at home and doing that sort of thing.
I do find that there is that opposite side of it, right? In having people, as you say, forced to stay at home. And
Mhm.
because it does allow them more time to spend with their baby. And I know that for myself, like I'm a very, like, I like to be on the go. I like to be busy. I like to get out of the house. But during COVID, it does force you to stay home and play with your baby and do the skin to skin and the cuddle time
Mhm.
that is so beneficial for that bond and that relationship. So I do find that that is happening more. Like,
Yeah, I just, because it's a challenging time, those first 3 months. I mean, when it comes to the planning part of the postpartum period, like you said, we're not planning well enough for this. We're
right.
planning and learning about childbirth. And I see it as well too. So in our classes, labor and delivery
Yes.
classes, they do tend to be slightly more attended than the feeding and family or baby class. For me, it comes down, and I'm sure you agree, I know you agree, that education ahead of time in that
Yes.
prenatal stage to at least have an idea of
Mhm.
what to expect when it comes to those main things like sleep and feedings and
Yeah.
what have you. What other ways would you say is important? Like, how could somebody plan for that period without, not aside from the education piece?
I think that it's important to kind of take a look at what do they think they're going to need support with and who is there to help. So, I mean, sometimes I think about it when I do talks about planning for postpartum. I think about the 5 W's, like the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why. So, who can help? And I mean, sometimes with people that don't have family or friends here, sometimes that village that they create is people like their coworkers or their neighbors or their children's friends' parents. So it doesn't necessarily have to be family member, but who is there to help support them? What do families want support with? So this really varies. So sometimes the typical things that people think of is like food, information, supplies, but then there's other things that families sometimes forget about, like pets, like who's going to walk the dog, or like
Mm-hmm.
all of those little things. So what type of support families want. And then the other thing we talk about is when, like, do sometimes it's helpful for people to be there at the very beginning, like a partner or a grandparent. But sometimes, as you know, with the growth spurts at like 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months, like
Mm-hmm.
those are times that where the baby may be feeding more or fussy or not sleeping as much. So sometimes the when part, if they can't take it right away, sometimes during those growth spurts is a great time to have support.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
But
then
the
the
right kind of
why.
support, right? The a
Exactly.
helping kind of support rather than I want to visit and hold the baby kind of
Mm-hmm.
support. Not appropriate for
Yes.
those growth spurt moments.
I
Yeah.
know. I
Yeah.
know. And that's something I talk about a lot because sometimes we have people in our houses, and sometimes it's not always by choice, right? With grandparents and in laws and aunts and uncles. But sometimes parents think they're going to be helpful to have these people, but sometimes those people tend to be more of a visitor, like you said, that aren't always as helpful. So I talk about the difference between a visitor and a helper and having those conversations prenatally with this is what I'm going to find really helpful. So is this something that you can help me with? Because
Mm-hmm.
even if you say to your mom, I think I'm good, I don't think I'll need a lot of support, they're still going to do something. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes giving them a task of, if you could cook me one meal a week and drop it off, that would be amazing. So it can be helpful to have those conversations with those people prenatally, just
Mm-hmm.
because I find that, when you're sleep deprived and you're emotional and you're trying to get the hang of breastfeeding and all of those questions, sometimes it's hard to have those conversations postpartum about what it is that you need
Yeah.
with all of that going on.
Yeah. Asking for help on a regular day without
Yes, I
having a
know.
baby is hard for so many people anyway.
It is.
But I that's something I preach to, Amy, and I mean, of
Mm-hmm.
course you would, and I'm so glad that you do talk about that as well, that, people want to help, and
Mm-hmm.
we can be so quick to say, like, if somebody say, oh, I'm coming over, what can I bring, or what do you need? Oh no, it's fine, just yourself, we were just hanging
Yes,
out. That's so easy to say, and maybe that's fine for the moment, but honestly, if you said, you know what, I'm really craving some candy from the store, or I
totally.
really would love, like, I need a coffee or a
Yes,
meal or a snack. Asking, it sounds strange and it's hard for people to say that. I know it really was for me
yes,
too, but they would be so happy to do that
I
for
know.
you. They want to
Mm-hmm.
help and they want to feel helpful. So it would be mutually beneficial.
Yes. And it seems so like sometimes that's really tricky for new parents to do, but you're right. If I had Starbucks brought to me when I was on mat leave, like I would have been so incredibly grateful, right? Like
I
I
would have
just
cried. I would have cried.
absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
A
Like it's
happy cry.
just those little things that help new
Mhm.
parents.
It's fine to be the visitor too, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also, there's always going to be help there.
Yeah.
Whether it's family, friends, a neighbor, postpartum doulas, they're
Yeah.
around. Do you find that people, new parents, moms, whoever, talk to you about um, other people in their lives, family members, friends, what have you, that, from a different time, perhaps a different
Mm-hmm.
way of living, that the suggestions and the opinions that are being put forth to, especially a new parent, but any parent, I
Mm-hmm.
think, about how to do things, or, oh, they must be hungry, or, oh, they must be this, and do you find you come across that a lot, and how do you help them navigate that? Because that is definitely a question that I get a lot, and try to help them navigate too. It's hard
It's
when
very hard.
it's not in line with maybe current standards or recommendations, or just with what you want to do as a parent. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious if you hear those stories, or how you might help somebody navigate through that.
I mean, sometimes I joke about it and say, just blame the postpartum doula, right? Like I'm always
Yes.
like, I can always be the bad guy, right? Because
Totally.
I can always say, well, my doula told me, like, I'm always like, use that line all the time. Like, you're okay with that. I think
Mm-hmm.
it depends. I've heard different strategies of like, if it's their in laws, then the partner talks to that family about these are our choices and this is what we're going to do. And we would really love your support.
Mm.
So some grandparents, I mean, I say that term loosely, or some visitors, sometimes they're very interested to learn more. And
Mm.
sometimes if you say that to them, they're like, oh, I didn't know that. Or, oh, that's so interesting. Things have really changed. So there is a good part of that, because I find that if the conversations happen, I feel like most grandparents want to absorb that information.
Yeah.
But then you have others that just say these comments that like aren't necessary, right? Or
Unhelpful.
just
Yeah.
not helpful. And I mean, it's all about talking to the parents about, I mean, you are confident in your decisions and you know that this is what you want to do. So sometimes it's strategies, right? Like who they have over, when they have them,
Yeah.
what time of day.
For what
And
activity,
sometimes,
or for,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And or having limitations on that. Um, having quick visits, or I mean, they want it's I always encourage women to be able to feed in front of whoever, but sometimes they like having a bit of a retreat to their bedroom for
Right.
15 minutes when there's visitors there. So
Yeah.
I think it's different based on different families, but it can go well.
Right.
Like it is a scary conversation to have, but I find that, yeah, if the mother talks to their mother and the partner talks to their parents, it's usually
Mm-hmm.
better that way.
Yeah. 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 And even if you can, maybe they don't always understand why you're
Mm-hmm.
making those choices, but if you can respect them, if you can,
Yes.
that's the goal, I guess. It's creating
Mm-hmm.
those boundaries, right?
Yes.
Like you were
And
saying,
some,
there's limitations on the time or
yeah,
how long you're visiting or what have you.
yeah.
That would be helpful.
And even sometimes I'll say like the loving care books are really great and up to date. So if like you left that open on your coffee table when your mom came over, Or
Mm.
like partners, right? Like I'm always like, put it in the bathroom and turn off the Wi-Fi. Like I tease that way, but right, like if they want someone to read them, then like you just have to put them in a spot and casually leave it open for them to
Yeah,
look.
yeah.
Like,
Oh, a little
yeah,
light reading.
yeah. Oh, what's
Absolutely.
that?
And,
So
if anything else, you can nod and smile and then close the door and
exactly,
you're doing your
exactly.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think sometimes it takes people by surprise.
Yeah.
Like I think that sometimes they're like, well, I thought my mom, I like even myself, my mom came on my parents came on my due date on December 28th after 7 days of me doing all the laundry and all the cooking and all the snow shoveling for everybody. I had to ask them to leave.
Mm.
I was like,
Yeah.
and then talking to them after being like, I anticipated you coming over and filling my freezer and helping me do stuff. And that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, and then I went 6 more days. Like, can you imagine if they stayed 2 weeks? I would have got,
Right.
and they're
Tiring
helpful
yourself out.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
helpful now.
Yeah.
Um, but I wasn't anticipating that. And sometimes I hear that part of it. Whereas my mom was coming, she stayed with me for 2 weeks. I thought she was going to be super helpful, but it wasn't actually what I needed at that time.
So speaking up
So,
about that, while it's a very hard conversation, it feels
yes.
hard.
Yeah.
Usually, hopefully, they want to
Mm-hmm.
help and they're
Yeah.
willing to learn. That's awesome.
And I kind of always go to food, right? Like if your mom comes over and she's not helpful, like if you could at least get her to bring like a meal, right? Or
Pick up the groceries that were
pick up the
ordered,
groceries, like
whatever.
getting
Yeah.
them to do something that's helpful.
Yeah.
And giving them a set, like if they're not helpful at your house, but giving them a set task.
Mm.
So usually that's like making
Being
muffins once a week
specific.
or being
Yeah.
very specific about what you need. That's helpful. And food is always helpful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Or laundry going into the dryer.
yes.
That's gonna be
Yeah,
happening too.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I find it kind of depends on the families. I mean, some of the stories I hear, I'm just like, what are you talking? Like, who would say that? Right. But
Oh, listen,
I
I
know.
know it's something.
Mm-hmm.
It's something. So it can be hard to navigate, but either creating those boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
smile and nod, do your
Yeah.
thing, or have those conversations if you feel like you
Yeah.
can. Amazing. Amy, this has been such a great conversation. We're on the same wavelength and we
Yes.
touch base every now and again. I know you're really busy and Embrace Doula is doing such great work. I will definitely link in the show notes all of this, but I'm wondering if you could just
Oh,
share with
thank
us,
you.
like, how can people find you and what are you up to these days?
We are in families. So during COVID, some people have chosen to delay their visits, but they can still reach out. So we are in some families' homes with regular testing and masks, and we're following all the public health protocols and being as mindful as we can. So we are still in families' homes. The best way to reach out is to find us on our website of Embrace Doula. We're also really active on social media of Instagram and Facebook. Those are the main places that you can reach out to us if you have any questions. And honestly, I mean, there's lots of postpartum doulas in Nova Scotia, and the Nova Scotia Doula Association has them all listed, and they all range in experience and price, and they're all lovely. But I would say the biggest tip too, if people were looking for postpartum doulas, is to inquire early. I know that people are expecting now in like September, October. So there's no harm in inquiring, or if you have any questions, there's lots of different ways that we meet with families, whether it's the drop-in or postpartum doulas or infant massage. So don't hesitate
Amazing.
at any time with any questions.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, again, I'm going to link to that in the show notes. So if anybody needs to reach out and do a little email to you, then they can.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this, Amy. I really appreciate it again. And I'm sure I think there's lots to talk about here. So maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Yes, for sure. That would be great.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Looking for more? Check out birthbabysleep.ca, where you'll find prenatal classes, postpartum and new baby resources, and sleep support during the childhood years. You'll also find me on Facebook and Instagram at Birth Baby Sleep. It would be awesome if you followed us wherever you listen to podcasts, and if you can, leave a review or a rating, which goes a long way for helping others to find us. That's all for now. I'm Ashley Cooley, and we'll see you back here next time.